Welcome, Sandi Reed.
First of all, I think you two need to get together and have cheeseburger and chocolate parties.
Yeah.
I think that would be a great idea. A lot of everybody now is, with the market starting to get better, they're starting to ask, what's my home worth? You know, how do we price it? Can we put it on the market? Can I get out of it what I need? And so pricing of a home, there's 3 different methodologies. One is what the home seller thinks it is worth. Number 2 is what the industry thinks it's worth. And number 3 is what the buyer thinks it is worth. Sometimes it's the same and sometimes it's not. We're now in what they call an appreciating market, where as before home prices were going like that and then they kind of went like this, and now we're kind of going back up. And so in some areas the market's hotter than other areas. There's some that are still kind of depressed. And so we have to treat each of those areas specifically and differently. And in certain areas, like where I live in South-Lees Summit, there's a lot of new construction too. So we have to price, when we're looking at home values, we have to look at that as a resale as opposed to new construction. And sometimes new construction is either going to be your friend or your enemy when you're trying to sell your house. In my specific subdivision, the builder out there had bought tons of lots from another builder. Well, he went bankrupt, and so they got all these lots really, really cheap, so they could build a cheaper house. Well, they are now, and so that was competing with the existing homes that would normally, because if you can buy a house for $250, $260 new, why would you buy this one for $250? You know, that's 10 years old, that kind of thing. So it was really causing a problem. Well, now in this case, the new sign for the subdivision is houses 3 and up. So they're either paying more for lots or they're just charging more for the house. So now that new construction is not the same. Now it's a draw to the neighborhood. So when Parade of Homes comes on, there'll be people coming through the neighborhood, and when they go through there and figure out they can't afford that house, then they can start, if they like the neighborhood, they will start looking at these other houses, because now the $250,000 house does not compete with the $320,000 house. So, but in a situation where they're building at the same price that the resale is, it's tough to fight new construction because everybody thinks they have to have new, and sometimes new is better and sometimes new is not better, because when you buy a new house, you forget about all those trips to Walmart to get do you know that they don't put toilet paper holders and rods for your towels in most new construction anymore? Because it is the #1 callback for people ripping out of the wall. So a lot of builders don't do it. I don't know if your dad still puts in there. Yeah, but
We just use mollies.
yeah, but a lot of builders do not do that anymore. So that's a trick. And all those things that you're used to having in your regular house that you live in, and you come in and you don't have it, and the curtains and everything like that. So there's a lot of extras that people don't think about when they're moving in new construction. But so going back to what's my home worth. When I have somebody, I had a call yesterday, or that I went on yesterday. Lives in Greenwood, in the older part of Greenwood, but close enough to new construction and newer homes. Her home was built in '85. What I call the newer homes were built in the early 2000s and are bigger, higher ceilings, just built a little bit differently. Might have the same square footage, but a little more for some people of that spacious, open concept a little bit more. So when I look at her house, I try to compare it. First of all, I draw a circle around that neighborhood, the house, of a quarter mile to see what's going on there. And if there's things that I can compare it against, I do. If there's an exact house, that's really great. Or same year, same bedrooms, bathrooms, things like that. If there's foreclosures, I have to add them in the mix, but I don't really pay too much attention to it. And if that doesn't work, I go on a half mile or further on. However, I do to find the things that are comparable. And then I try to subtract out things that are too new, just to try and zone in and get the best, what the market is doing. Now, what's interesting with this appreciating market, however, is that in this case, the most expensive house in half-mile radius that kind of fit her criteria was sold at $125,000. But the things that are under contract are in the 130s and even a 141. So and this is something that appraisers are having to adjust to now, that as the market is going up, they have to think a little bit differently as they're pricing it, because usually what they would do is compare it against what is sold. In the declining market, they would do that, but you see kind of in a subtract mode where you're kind of in a addition mode now as things go up. So the fact that prices are under the pending and the show for backup houses are higher means that we're trying to create an upswing in the market. And so I ended up listing her house in the low 140s because, for one thing, she's got the time to take if she doesn't have to move and things like that. But because that's kind of where it looks like we could, because it's all about what the appraiser is going to appraise it for, and it doesn't matter. They're not going to appraise it for more than it's worth, but they're, correct me if I'm wrong with this, they're only concerned about appraising it for enough to meet the needs of the loan. So they don't get really crazy unless there's if this is just such an abnormality in the neighborhood. You rarely see a house that appraises for more than a few thousand more than what the loan covers for.
The appraiser needs the contract.
Yeah.
So
that's all he's
they
worried
they
about.
have to get 120, they're not going to work real hard to get 125.
Yeah.
Unless you're doing a refi, then they actually have to do some work.
Right. So it's when people say, well, what did the appraisal say? It may or may not. It's numbers and it's subjective. In any of this, it's numbers and subjective. And the wild card in the whole thing is our buyers. If you've got a house that buyer has a specific need and you meet that specific need, they may pay more for that house because you're the only one in town like that. I have a house that's closing this Friday with a little luck. I think it's going to close. In Greenwood, it was on the market 3 days, and it had people. It was a revolving door, of people coming and going. And my buyer has a specific need. He does boat repair, and he wants to have his own business. This had a big barn, big shed with a high garage door, so he could take pontoons in, he could do boat storage. He's been looking for a year to try and find something like this. And so he was willing to pay full price for it because he knew this particular situation is never going to come along again. So if you've got something that's unusual, we take that into consideration a little bit when we're pricing a house. And so like I said, I think like an appraiser to some degree, I don't go as in depth as it. If you really want to know of value, hire an appraiser to have an actual appraisal. But there's enough, they still work off the same data I do, other than the fact that they might check county records to see if something is sold that wasn't on MLS. But I've been doing this 10 years, and I can kind of walk in and sort of have a gut feeling of what I think it's worth, and then I just go back to the numbers to substantiate to see if that is what it is. And then the other factors are days on the market. How many, if the average house is selling for 120 days on the market, you know that even though everything's pricing and it's selling, you're going to be on there a little bit longer. Days on the market are starting to shorten a little bit in some areas. Some areas not yet though, because one of the things that is, the other phenomenon that's happening right now is those people who've been sitting around for 3 years to try and sell their house, but they couldn't because they were upside down or they might be breaking even. They can only price it at such a certain price to pay the closing costs, the realtor's fees, and to walk away at a break-even point, or maybe have money for their down payment. So some of those houses might sit on the market a little bit longer. And I got the cue, I think, from Jim.
2 minutes.
Oh, 2 minutes? Okay. So there will be some longer days on the market for those people who are trying to sell, but they just don't have a lot of room yet. So it's really kind of an interesting time right now that we're in. It's kind of exciting because like I said, things are getting better. And housing starts are at record levels right now, which means when they start digging holes in the ground, either people are tired of waiting or the market is healing. And the housing starts don't happen if you don't have the first time home buyer house to sell so that they can buy the bigger house so they can buy the bigger house. So, and that's what creates that appreciating market. So, any questions about anything? Yes.
What markets are you seeing taking off and what markets are more flat, or what areas?
Probably the hottest markets are in the Northland and in Johnson County still. Johnson County, and part of the reason why Johnson County is such a hot market is in Overland Park, there's no land. So it's all resale and people want to live there. So those markets are going, most of the construction is Olathe, in the outskirts, because there's just, and that's the same way in established neighborhoods in other cities where you don't have the land. As long as you've got land, you're going to have some fluctuations with the market, but when you don't have places for people to build a lot of houses, and everybody, Johnson County's a hot market. Northland's always been hot, but they still have some new construction. Probably, the Kansas City, part of Kansas City Raintown that's in Hickman Mills, schools are still slow to recover. And part of it is school district driven too. In the Raintown, there's almost a $15,000 to $20,000 difference between a Raintown school house, same house in Raintown as opposed to being in Hickman Mills for Kansas City School District. So, Independence, the newer parts are appreciating faster than the older parts, just because you have a lot more to choose from in the older parts. Yes.
I would just say too, as a buyer, there's a lot of homes out there in the recent past that were short sales and different things like that. They're a little more confusing to navigate. And I relied on Sandy to help me buy a home about 2 years ago, and it was a short sale situation, which is a little more confusing, has a lot more going on with it in some ways, and sometimes doesn't get closed, but Sandy got it done in like 30 days, and it's awesome. So it saved us about $10,000 over their asking price too, because of good advice.